Hello and welcome to Pensions in 10 with me, David Brooks, and my colleague, Simon Kew. This week, we're going to talk to you about the Gordian Knots of the State Pension Challenge. We're going to talk to you about employer covenant guidance, and then finally, more on tax-free cash in the budget. So first up, Simon, we're going to talk about the State Pension Challenge, I think. There's a policy challenge. There's a couple of stories that I think are linked into the way the government are going to have to think about state pension, and not just this government, but I think many future governments have to think about it. So, Simon, I think you spotted something about life expectancy across the country and how that's different.
Indeed, it is. And we know this anyway. I mean, we particularly know this because we work with actuaries who keep telling us. But the Office of National Statistics has released their study again. So it's an annual study, which says that men born in Blackpool will now live until just after their 73rd birthday on average, which is 6 years less on average than the rest of England. And Blackpool has overtaken Glasgow for the first time ever, and having the lowest life expectancy in the UK, which is, well, it's not particularly great for anyone who's living in Blackpool or Glasgow, of course, but it does, as you rightly say, raise a very serious question around things like the state pension. I mean, for instance, the study goes on to say that Blackpool life expectancy has dropped by about 18 months since the COVID pandemic in 2019. So that's had a marked drop. The saying that they mention in the article is wealth brings health and poverty brings death. And it's being highlighted in these figures here. But that link across to the state pension, of course, means some people are paying their national insurance for goodness knows how many years, and they're not actually getting the benefit from it, or potentially they're not getting the benefit from it. So, yeah, I've seen one thing saying that the state pension is a Ponzi scheme, which is,
But it isn't. I mean, it just isn't a Ponzi scheme. Unfortunately, I think as it sort of links to the policy area that we're talking about is, if it is a Ponzi scheme, you need more people coming in from the bottom. So, it's I think like a pyramid scheme is like a Ponzi scheme, isn't it? So, and we have the opposite problem. Our demographic is there are fewer people coming in at the bottom to pay it. And so that's just the nonsense. It isn't a Ponzi scheme, but it is a big headache because you have the triple lock, which we've talked about many times, but, is there and ratchets up the state pension. And so it gets more expensive. And that is seemingly very difficult for politicians to change or reduce or adapt in some way. And so the only other lever we start getting is the state pension age lever, and we have a 10-year gap for that to kick in for announcements. And then we have statistics like the one Simon was talking about, where it's for some people they might get their state pension for 10 years, and some people might get their state pension for 20 years. And if you start moving it up to 67, 68 and onwards to make it more affordable for the country, you're going to get pushback from people that say, well, I live in Blackpool, I live in Glasgow, I've had a manual job my whole life, and I can't just carry on working because I'm physically unable to do so. And the society challenge that presents, I think, is a massive one for government to get their head around. I don't know what the answer is, because you would think glibly, as we probably all have done, life expectancy is going up, whether that's at birth or age 65 or whenever you start measuring it from. But if the statistics start suggesting that it isn't going up, that lever becomes harder to pull. And I think the pressure then starts to going back on the triple lock again. We need to look at that, and the difference between that and working age benefits, and how working age benefits go up by inflation or wages. But then the triple lock gets its best of three. Is that fair to everybody? I think that's going to be a big issue. But the government have said they're going to keep triple lock for this parliament. So, well, that this whole, what's the phrase? Not parliament, is it? That'd be this 1 year. I think for the whole length of this government, they're going to keep the triple lock. So we're not going to have that conversation again until the next election in 4.5 years' time or so.
And just on triple lock, Dave, I saw a quote today which suggests that if there's a Conservative government after the next election, which, let's be honest, looking at the polling figures currently, that looks highly unlikely. But were there to be a Conservative government next time, they've indicated that they will remove the triple lock. Whether that is absolutely correct or not, I don't know. It depends on their policy wonks. Is it likely to come in so much as, are we likely to see a Conservative government? It's looking unlikely at the moment, but you never know. The polls are fickle things, as indeed are the people that vote. So, yeah. Well, Dave, we have news from my former world, the world of employer covenant. What an exciting world it is. What's the latest development, Dave?
Well, it's all linked to the funding code, and we've been waiting a while for the regulator to issue their covenant guidance, and that is now released to the wild. So being billed as the last piece of the jigsaw to allow the funding code to operate effectively, I suppose, which it is. It's the first time that covenant has been on the statute, so now it's sort of officially defined, and trustees should be a lot clearer on what they need to do. So the guidance is there, and we expect it to be very useful for those schemes, particularly for schemes that perhaps haven't engaged with covenant guidance before, or covenant work before for whatever reason. You'll need to get into the detail of that to make sure that you're now ticking the right boxes when you come around to your valuation, that you're getting that covenant support you need. For schemes that have engaged before, it's probably going to be more of a tweak to what you've done before, to work with your covenant advisor on perhaps some slightly different questions, to which you'll get some slightly different answers. You'll need to maybe tweak your monitoring for the future, for what you do, what you're actually interested in, because it's all about visibility and reliability and these kind of phrases for the future of the sponsor. But also it's in the backdrop of better funding positions for schemes, and so reliance on the covenant might be different anyway than it was in your valuation 3 or 4 years ago. So yeah, very interesting. We've been waiting for it, so we can actually at last use it in anger.
Well, viewer and listener, this week's Thank You Captain Obvious story is one relating to tax-free cash. Dave, do you want to give us the details?
Yeah, so this goes back to all the kerfuffle around the budget and what Rachel Reeves may or may not do about tax-free cash. And so some people have taken their tax-free cash and have now had a little bit of regret, a bit of remorse about taking that action. And HMRC have had to include in the latest newsletter that you cannot pay your tax-free cash back to the scheme. You cannot undo this stuff once it is done. And I think it's something that, well, Simon already knew. He said it was Captain Obvious, but it is obvious because this is the way the world works. And I know some platforms, some providers have said there can be a cooling off period. That is not, and never has been, or not in my understanding as a pensions techie person, is something that you can do. You can't do one thing one day regarding tax-free cash and then pay it back. In fact, there are very strict rules called the recycling rules about what you can do when you take your tax-free cash and how you then can use it with regards to pensions. So, you're not allowed to pay it straight back into a pension because the government will give you tax relief on that. They don't like the idea of you taking tax-free cash, paying it back into a pension, but even undoing it, there's like an arbitrage. Next time, every time there's a budget, if they allowed this, every time there's a budget, there will be a swathe of people going, I will take my tax-free cash just in case. And if it doesn't go against me, I'll put it back in again. So it's a bit of a nonsense, really. And it's a bit embarrassing. The HMRC have to come out and correct everybody about this.
And the question is, Dave, are we going to see an uptick in the purchase of Lamborghinis as a result of this?
They could do something with that money, I suppose. So maybe, yeah, who knows?
Dear viewer and listener, thank you for joining us for another week of Pensions in 10. Dave and I are both together. I mean, it's a rare occurrence. It's also nice not to be in Prague. It's slightly warmer here. Thank you for bearing with us. 3 stories, well, 3 and a bit stories that we hope have kept you intrigued and informed over the last 10 minutes or so. We very much hope to see you next week. Please subscribe, listen to us on your favourite podcast provider, fruit-based or otherwise, and we'll see you next week. Take care.